welcome to Adventures in Life. I'm Earl Beecher, your host. Our guest is Ken Borgers. He's the morning drive man from America's jazz station, KLON, in Long Beach. Ken has been kind enough to agree to stay and do a second show, and so that's what we're going to do. Ken, KLON is not just another radio station. It's a major force in the community. You're doing a lot of things just besides radio programming.
We are. KLON is the station for jazz in Southern California and around the country by cable and satellite. Not only jazz recordings, but we are also a major force in jazz performance. And we produce a lot of live jazz and blues events.
Events, not just programs, events.
Events, and not just...
Tell us about the Blues Festival.
Yeah, I was going to say, not just your typical concert where you bring in a band and they play. Our events always have some kind of major theme to them. The Blues Festival that you mentioned, case in point, we have had a Blues Festival on the campus of Cal State Long Beach. We actually started another place in Long Beach the first year. When we moved to Cal State, the Blues Festival moved with it. And we've done a Blues Festival now for years and years. It's the largest blues festival west of the Mississippi.
How many people come?
We get 10 to 12,000 a day, and we've done it now for several years, 3 days. It's a 3-day festival now. And it happens over Labor Day weekend. And it's always got a theme. We do blues from Chicago or blues from Texas, and we bring in all the people we can find related to that side of the blues. People you don't get a chance to see out here very often. When we did blues from New Orleans or blues from Louisiana, we brought out people who had lived their whole lives in little towns in Mississippi, and they'd never been out.
And here they were suddenly facing 12,000 people.
More people than live in the town, you know. And I wish I could think of the fellow's name, but there was a guy we had a few years ago, came from this little place, didn't have running water.
Oh my.
You know, he's 90, this fellow. Lived his whole life in this little town. I mean,
but he was one of the great blues recording artists.
He was a great country, you know, blues.
Well, who's some of the very popular blues artists?
Well, we've had, of course, B.B. King would have to be the most popular blues personality in America, kind of larger-than-life figure now, perennial winner of the blues. When we have a membership drive, KLON's, and we'll talk about that. KLON's a member-supported service. When we have a membership drive, B.B. King is nearly always the winner of the blues poll. He has stiff competition, though, from the late Stevie Ray Vaughan, who was just starting to make a real name for himself when he died a few years ago. And BB and Stevie are 1 and 2, and sometimes they trade places. They're the two big vote getters. And of course, you can't talk about the blues and not talk about people like Big Joe Turner, who was the very first star of the first KLON Blues Festival.
How many stars do you have come to one of those festivals?
Oh, gee, we have each day 6 to 8 acts. 6 to 8 major acts. Groups. And then sometime in the course of the 3 days, we do a big tribute. We did a tribute to Chess Records, the great Chicago label, and we brought in all sorts of people related to chess, and they each played just for a little bit, and then at the end they all played together. You know? Now,
your blues programming is separate from the jazz programming in that you have a specific schedule. It's usually weekends.
There's a little bit of blues played in the jazz throughout the week, but we have one show on the weekend devoted to nothing. Well, in fact, it's called Nothing But the Blues. It's on from 2 to 6 on Saturday and Sunday, and that is the biggest blues show in America. It's one of, I won't say it's the, but it's one of the most popular public radio programs in America.
Do other stations carry it?
No, it's only carried exclusively
through your
KLON.
Okay. Now, you also have a Latin jazz show, which appeals to a certain segment of the population that's important.
Absolutely, and increasingly so in Southern California, as you know.
Yes.
Jose Rizzo, the host of, and before we get too far away from the blues show, should mention Gary Wagner. We call him.
Oh, yeah.
We call him the Wagman.
Okay.
And since the Wagman took over the blues show a few years ago, it was always popular, but Gary has built it into a huge show, the most popular program on KLON for sure. But not far behind it would be the Latin show with Jose Rizzo. Jose is very plugged into the Latin community. And Jose's great skill, we've had several people who've had Latin shows with KLON over the years. Jose's been with us now for 10 years plus. Jose's great skill is in marrying the regular jazz audience to the Latin jazz audience.
I've always loved the Latin, the danceable rhythms. And
yes, but always before that show became a strictly salsa show of limited appeal, some appeal, but of limited appeal to the mainstream jazz audience. But Jose has a sense for what the Latin audience will like and what the mainstream audience will like, and he plays, his music is a blend, really a blend of Latin and mainstream jazz. There are elements of salsa in it, sure. There are elements of Cuban music. It's really a great blend. He's drawing on the tradition that Dizzy Gillespie and Machito, started all those years ago, and that marriage of Latin jazz to mainstream post-war jazz. Jose is right in there with it.
It's interesting to talk to you, Ken, because you have such a rich background. You've been talking to the people who create the programs. You've been talking to the performers and interviewing them and working with them on the caravans. We haven't mentioned those.
We should talk about the caravans.
Please do.
In addition to the Blues Festival, which is the biggest thing we do every year, we have a number of small concerts that we do. And the guy behind the Blues Festival and all of these smaller concerts that we do is, should mention his name. His name is Ken Poston. He's a genius. This guy is the next major producer. Name may not be a household name to people outside of jazz, but people like Norman Granz and people like George Wein are well-known jazz producers, producers of international
jazz of the Philharmonic is what Norman did.
Norman did, yes. Ken has that same flair for bringing together disparate people that you don't normally see together and making magic happen. It's, as you know, being the proprietor of a jazz label, you have your own label, which we haven't mentioned, but Earl Beecher is the president of Outstanding Records, and when you make a record, it's the same as when you do a live concert. It's easy to get the people together, the equipment together.
But then you got to make the magic happen.
Got to make the magic happen.
Yeah, right.
And that's a real skill. That's very hard. And Ken has that ability to make magic happen. He is a young guy. He came to us more than 10 years ago now. And I remember when I first met him, I said to myself, this is the guy we need to have, because he was, at the time he was 25, and he was the head of the Kansas City Jazz Commission. He was out here on vacation, just coming through town. But the reason he came out here was he wanted to take pictures of West Coast jazz club sites. Not clubs now, but sites where jazz clubs had been. He's a student
some
of West
the famous
Coast,
ones and things.
He's a student of West Coast jazz, and he came through town to take pictures of these now really basically mostly vacant lots. And when we had lunch, he wanted to see the station because he knew about KLON. We had lunch and he pulled out this collection of photographs. He said, you see where this vacant lot is? That's where the Hague was, right there. And I said, we need this guy.
Yeah, this is our type of man.
Yeah, and he's been with us now, let's say, for more than 10 years. Brilliant producer.
And so, what are the caravans like?
The caravans. The caravans were a concept that Ken brought with him from Kansas City. He'd done them out there, and they have worked splendidly out here for a number of years. The caravan concept involves getting several jazz clubs together, 10 to 20 jazz clubs together, and we issue people from the community, people who want it, a caravan pass, which gets them into any or all of the participating clubs with one pass. There's no other charge. There's no cover. You don't have to buy a drink when you get there. There's no other admission of any kind. You just flash this pass, you go on in. In addition, and the real genius behind the caravan is we have buses that run from club to club all night long. And they circulate. They stop at each club about every 20 minutes. So you can start at any point in the caravan. You leave your car there. You can stay there. You can go around to all the different clubs and check out all the jazz for one admission price, and we charge $10, $12, something like that.
You can stay in one club all evening if you happen to like that artist.
Yeah, or if you want to ride the bus, and just riding the buses is fun because you're with a whole bunch of KLON fans, you know.
Yeah, I see.
So it's a great way to get out and see and hear a lot of great music, and go to clubs that you might not have been to before.
I
might
want
not know
you
how
to
to
give
get
us the names of some of the clubs when we come back. We're going to pause now for a public service announcement. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Ken Borgers and I were discussing some of the jazz caravans that KLON sponsors throughout the year. Actually, you have them several times.
We do. We do. We have several jazz caravans and blues caravans. Leading up to the Blues Festival, we always do a couple of blues caravans. And again, circuit tour of the best blues clubs around LA. So they're really great events.
Tell me, you have a Hall of Fame. What is that?
The Hall of Fame started when we became a jazz station and started doing membership drives to raise money to support the station. KLON's a member-supported service. More than 50% of the money to operate comes directly from listeners in the form of memberships. We sell memberships. Several times a year, usually 3 times a year, we will interrupt the programming and invite people to participate directly in the financial part of the operation. You see it on public television. It's the same kind of thing.
Now, the NPR stations do that. Explain what NPR is, will you?
Okay. You hear the terms NPR and PBS. PBS is the public broadcasting service. That is the television side of public broadcasting.
KCET and KOCE,
yes,
and some of the other channels.
Yes. NPR is the radio side of public broadcasting. Congress allocates a certain amount of money, less, I'm sorry to say, every year, but a certain amount of money to help support public broadcasting. They give some money to public television, some money to public radio. That money is distributed, the radio part of it is distributed through an organization called the Corporation for Public Broadcasting that funds National Public Radio.
How many of those NPR stations are there?
There are more than 300
nationwide
public radio stations. There are 7 major public radio stations in the LA basin. Not all of them are members of NPR. It is worth noting. We are not members of NPR anymore.
You were, though.
We were. KUSC was, and we both decided.
KCRW? And
KCRW still is. Still a very strong NPR station.
How about
KPCC.
KPCC, thank you.
Still a member of NPR. They're the 2 big NPR stations.
Now, they're all associated with community colleges and universities.
Correct.
In the area.
Correct.
Okay.
KUSC and we decided to withdraw from NPR. Our dues were too much money, and the bulk of our programming we were generating ourselves. NPR is a tremendous program service, and at smaller stations they depend in large part often on the programming from NPR. We were generating so much of our own local programming that it didn't make sense for us or for KUSC to continue to pay the dues to NPR. So we withdrew and put that money instead into the local programming, particularly into the local news side of the operation. So although we're not NPR, we're still public radio, community supported by the community donations.
There is that difference. There is a membership in that group, and then some stations are not members.
Public stations.
Public stations.
We're one of those.
Okay.
So back to your question about how the Hall of Fame got started.
Yes.
When we started doing drives to support the station, we decided it might encourage people to participate if we said, we're going to have a Hall of Fame. And when you call in with a pledge, you can vote for your favorite artist. And the winner of the favorite artist poll will be featured all day long when the membership drive is over. And people got very excited about that, and it's become a tradition. You know, every time we have a membership drive, we add a new name to the Hall of Fame. Past favorite artist poll winners are ineligible to win again.
So it's always somebody new.
It's always somebody
Who was
new.
your first winner?
Very first winner was Duke Ellington. And
I'm not surprised.
And that should surprise no one. Part of, I think, the reason for that was the very first membership drive, we played nothing but Duke Ellington for 9 days.
Oh, well, that's loading the deck, Ken.
Well, it was. I admit it. But you know what? We hardly scratched the surface of the music written and performed by the maestro.
Really?
We didn't begin to play the wealth of Duke Ellington. Bob Epstein, the wonderful former host of classic jazz on KLON, now passed away, I'm sorry to say, spearheaded that whole drive and brought in a tremendous amount of Duke Ellington that even we, with our library, didn't have.
Oh, my.
Bob was a voracious collector, and so we had access to very rare Ellingtonia, and we played a lot of delightful things. I must admit, though, that at the end of that 9 days, none of us really wanted to hear any Ellington for a while.
You'd been saturated.
We played an awful lot of Duke. Of course, we still play the Duke. He's
Yes, I know you do.
He's one of the patron saints of this place.
Yes. Who are some of the other winners?
Oh, gee, it's a who's who of jazz. Everyone from Count Basie to Miles Davis to Billie Holiday and Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan and Woody Herman and Horace Silver. It's all the greats.
Yeah, most of those that you have named are indeed the greats, but most of them have passed on.
Well, that's true.
Horace Silver is with
one notable exception, being Horace, and Poncho Sanchez. But you're right. Of course, a lot of the great ones have left us.
Pancho Sanchez. So you have a Latin jazz winner.
Poncho won the favorite artist poll, absolutely. And you know, Poncho, it's worth mentioning because Poncho is, I think, representative of the new rising stars.
He's definitely rising.
On the way up to fill the void left by the departures of the Dizzies, you know, and the Miles from the world stage. But Poncho, heck, has been a patron saint of KLON from the very beginning, you know, and we've seen him grow from the time that he was, you know, in the late 70s, he was sideman with Cal Jader, into now having his own band and being the major force for Latin jazz music, certainly on the West Coast, and getting increasingly well known on the East Coast.
Who are some of the rising stars currently? Not necessarily winners. Well, Mel Torme, of course, is a classic example of a winner.
Yes, but you can't really talk about rising star.
No, he's there.
He's there.
Been there.
He's been there
for a long time.
Yeah, he's a wonderful, of course, wonderful performer. In fact, a recent winner of the KLON favorite artist poll. In fact, I should tell you a little story about Mel Torme. When KLON increased its power, we have 8,000 watts now, which isn't very much, but it's a lot more than the 1,200 we had when we started as a jazz station.
I remember you going through the turmoil of getting the...
It took a long time to get the power increase, as you remember. And when we finally got it, after years of legal maneuverings of various kinds, we searched around for a suitable person to throw the switch. You know, we wanted to do a special thing. We invited Mel Torme to come down and be the one to throw the switch. And he was delighted. And he came down. We had a big ceremony outside. The engineer ran a wire out in the grassy area there in front of the station on the grounds at Cal State Long Beach, so that more people could see it. You know, and we invited people down, our major donors, and so.
Oh yes.
And there was Mel out on the grass. You know, and we had this big switch, and you know, he threw it, and suddenly, boom! You know, the lights went on all over Southern California. The signal reached out quite a bit more. And Mel was such a good sport and so much fun. A wonderful guy.
He has a great personality. I saw him at the Hollywood Bowl, and he had everybody right here. I mean, palm of his hand.
Oh, he's a master. You know, he was a master at that.
Yes.
So Mel, you'd have to say, but back to the rising star thing, because I think it's important to remember that jazz is an ongoing tradition, and although a lot of the greatest names have passed from the scene, an awful lot of very exciting players are on the way up, and indeed already well established, notably among them Wynton Marsalis. I mean, you'd have to say, here's a guy who is not in the category of rising star anymore. I mean, all the work that he's done with
established.
Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra and groups large and small, he's a major force, and is you know, one of the most important figures on the scene today. A past favorite artist poll winner too. His brother Branford is also a major force, but now they're old enough that you can't really consider them rising stars. There are some sensational young players now starting to make a name for themselves. People like Joshua Redman, tremendously exciting tenor saxophone player. Cyrus Chestnut, another wonderful piano man that's on the way up. And a guy that is, I think, one of the greatest players on his instrument in Southern California here. He'd been here for a long time. Ron Eshte, guitar player, 7-string guitar master. A very quiet fellow, but an absolutely wonderful performer. As good as there is, or has been, on the guitar, in my opinion. So, although we are losing, you know, we are losing people all the time.
How about vocalists?
These people are on the way up.
Where would you put Stephanie Haynes?
Oh, I think Stephanie Haynes is one of the most important singers on the scene in Southern California, without a doubt. Stephanie is, with her cohort Dewey Ernie, another great Southern California singer, they spearhead a group called the Great American Music Company. And it's a quintet, and they go around doing evenings of American popular music. Ellington, Gershwin, Cole Porter. They've got an evening of jazz at the movies that they do. And the bass player in the band, Jack Prather, sort of ties the whole thing together with just a little bit of narration, only a little. And he goes in and gets the nut of what's important about a song and a story that relates to that song about the person who wrote it. Wonderful.
Let's pause for another public service announcement. We'll be right back.
Miranda, what you doing today?
Cleaning my glasses.
What you doing?
Clean those glasses.
If you don't stop your friend from driving drunk, who will?
Now what you doing?
Do whatever it takes.
Which child deserves to be read to? This one? Or is it this one? Which child will learn to use a toothbrush? Who will have a chance to sing? The choice is yours. Volunteer for Head Start. With your help, more low-income preschool children can get what other children already have. Change the world of a child, and you change the world.
Our guest is Ken Borgers from KLON. Ken, as the president of a record company and a publisher of music, I get demo tapes, hundreds of them, from hopeful young performers. And one of the things that I think our viewers would be interested in is how do you go about getting something played on the air, especially on a station as important as KLON?
Well, what you do is, if you have a recording that you think is good, that you've done, you send it to KLON's program director. And his name is Scott Willis, W-I-L-L-I-S. Scott's very open to hearing things, and we break a lot of new music. You know, we are the first people to play.
Will you introduce new artists? Do you even bring them in and interview them?
Absolutely, we do. In fact, Scott deserves a lot of credit because he is the guy who sets all of those interviews up. And another thing Scott's done is started a whole series of recordings called Jazz for Members that are compilations of great jazz talent based right here in Southern California. Not household names, but people who should be.
Everybody starts somewhere.
The first one we did had people like Susie Hansen, wonderful Latin jazz violinist. Had Tom Kubas, the great arranger. A couple of cuts by him. Buddy Collette, the fellow who's heading up the Jazz Institute at Cal State Long Beach, has a track on the first Jazz for Members CD. So Scott's domain, and he's the guy to send music.
Now, when you play something do people call a station and say, hey, I like that, play that again? Do you do?
Sure.
What is it that tells you to repeat something that you've got a hit on your hands?
It's the individual taste of the performers, but what the audience wants to hear plays into that a lot. In fact, good case in point is Paul Smith. You're very familiar with Paul because as the president of Outstanding Records, you've produced how many? 16 records of Paul's over the years. Paul is a guy who's tremendously requested at KLON, and in fact, you'll remember this, I bet. Years ago now, you put out a recording of Paul's where he played The Girl from Ipanema.
Yes. Yes.
And I remember I had you on as a guest on KLON when that record came out, and you and I played that record, and we challenged people to tell us what instrument Paul. We didn't tell them who it was. We just played.
No, you couldn't tell them.
A little portion of the piece
where he was moving fast.
Nobody can move as fast as Paul Smith.
That's true.
We played a little segment there, and we told people to call, and we got, I don't remember, 200 calls, 150 calls?
218.
218. I knew it was some.
Before 5 people named a piano.
Everybody guessed everything else. They couldn't even tell it was a piano. Anyway, but Paul is certainly one of the most requested guys we have. So we do listen to what the audience wants to hear. I'll tell you another guy, tremendously popular, Gene Harris.
Oh, yes.
Tremendously popular piano player. There's a version of Just a Closer Walk with Thee, and when Gene starts stomping on that, people go crazy. So, yeah, it's largely a listener request.
So you do encourage the public to call the station?
Certainly. Hey, we're a member-supported station, so we have to respond to what our audience wants to hear.
Ken, it's been a real pleasure to have you here and to tell us about what's going on in the local university radio, public access.
Well, there's you mean with KLON?
With KLON.
Yeah, there's a wealth of stuff happening. We have the concerts coming up. We're going to be doing more caravans this year, later on in the year. Of course, don't forget the Blues Festival. I should mention again, because if you like the blues, it's the biggest blues event west of the Mississippi, and I can't tell you yet what'll happen at this year's Blues Festival. Still working on that.
You're planning it.
You can't until the contracts are signed on the bottom line.
Right.
But
they're telling me we've run out of time. So Ken Borgers, our guest from KLON. Ken, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Earl.
Thank you for joining us also, and please join us soon again for more adventures in life.